Welcome back to the Broadman Word, and we are continuing to walk through the creation accounts. And today we are coming to the creation of land animals, and that is the start of day 6 of the creation account. Start, but not end, as we'll get into next week with the creation of humankind. But today we're just going to look at land animals. But a couple things I do want to look at today as we walk through Genesis chapter 1, verses 24 and 25, which is where we're going today. First, why is there no blessing that God gives to birds and the sea living creatures on day 5? But there's no blessing there to the land animals at the start of verse or at the start of day 6. Why is that? Why is that blessing not there? And then the other thing that I want to take a look at is just kind of evolution itself and why we don't see evolution in the creation account as well. So, with that being said, let's dive right in Genesis 1, verses 24 and 25. And God said, "Let the earth bring forth living creatures according to their kinds, livestock and creeping things, and beasts of the earth according to their kinds." And it was so. All right, so we get back to the pattern that we've seen in days 1 through 4 of God saying something, what he is creating, and then the phrase, and it was so. If you're wondering why I didn't say day 5, you can take a look at that with the last part of this walkthrough of the creation accounts. But here that we're back to that pattern. Now, when it says let the earth bring forth living creatures, it doesn't mean, just like with the waters before, it doesn't mean that the earth itself created the animals. It just means that they literally came from the ground when God created them. So does this mean that God created them using dirt or something like that? I think it's very, very possible. However, it could also be, too, that it is just trying to show that the land animals are meant to live on land. And yes, that may include amphibians as well. But if we want to get super technical, yes, it would include amphibians as well. But I think for me, that's probably more likely. It's just God showing that, hey, these animals are created by me to stay on the land, to live on the land. So for me, that's probably where I go to. Just kind of like where I went to last time with the birds created to live in the sky, and then the sea living creatures, of course, created to live in the sea. Um, but the other thing that I wonder sometimes with the creation of animals, because again, we have the word kind or kinds, and if you want to know what that is, you can go back to the previous video. But really, really quickly, it just means a specific type of animal that is similar to other land animal types. That's what we are talking about. If you want to get super technical, I think it probably relates more to class or order when it comes to our classification system that we have today. But of course, that wasn't there when Genesis was written, and so it's really just meant for land animals. Now, when that from that though, I've always wondered what these animals would have looked like, just kind of with the creation of plants and vegetation on day 3. Same here with the land animals on day 6. Were they, let's talk about bunnies, were they all baby bunnies or were they all adult rabbits? I think it's probably a mixture, not babies, but maybe adolescent. But most likely, though, it is a broad majority are grown up because even though the blessing isn't here, the purpose of the blessing to the birds and the sea living creatures on day 5, I think, is assumed with the land creatures here on day 6 because of two things. One, they are given the command to be fruitful and multiply after the flood, after they get off the ark with Noah and his family. They are all commanded to be fruitful and multiply by God. So I think that's one reason, which goes to show that, yes, I don't think that all land creatures were created right then and there, and they just started dwindling from there on after the fall until the flood. I don't think that's how it worked. There was an actual reproductive cycle with land animals, even though the blessing isn't there, which we'll talk about in a second. But the big reason why I believe that they were mostly adults is because of the command that God gives to human beings to take dominion over the things that he has created, including the land animals themselves. As we see in verse 28, which we, or sorry, in verse 26, which we'll get into next week as we talk about the creation of humankind. So, but now we have to get to this blessing idea, but let's read verse 25 first. And God made the beasts of the earth according to their kinds, and the livestock according to their kinds, and everything that creeps on the ground according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Now, this isn't exactly like the pattern that we've seen all throughout, but it does go back to day 3, where you had the creation of the dry land called earth, and then the phrase, and God saw that was good. But then you have the creation of the plants and the vegetation. That is seen here. Yes, you have the creation of the land animals, and then God saying, and God saw that it was good. But then you have the creation of mankind, which, again, from a literary standpoint, is great writing because it just goes to show that, okay, something is really, really exciting is still going to happen before the end of this section, which we eventually will see in verse 31. So for me, I think that is why you have that little bit of a break there between verses 25 and 26. Now, the blessing isn't there, though, from day 5. And why is that? For me, I think it is just a choice by God, who is the author of Scripture, and then the writer of Genesis, who I believe is Moses. I think it is just a choice to really focus on the creation of man. And just from a count of verses, it makes sense. The creation of land animals takes up 2 verses, whereas the creation of humankind takes about 5 verses if you take out verse 31, because it's just a general overview of the whole day. It would take 5 verses, so that's a little more than double the amount. If my math is right. So for me, I think that's the reason why the blessing doesn't show up, because you want to get to the main focus of the 6th day, which is the creation of humankind. And we'll talk about why that is and why we are meant to be seen as a special creation within the overall amazing creation of the creation account. I think that is the reason why you don't see the blessing there. Now, very, very quickly about evolution. In Scripture, in the creation account, we do not see evolution. We do not see macro evolution. And what I mean by macro evolution is this theory that you can go from an organism to let's say a fish, and then from a fish to a a bird, and then a bird to an amphibian or a reptile, and then from a reptile to a primate, and then from primate to a human being. Those changes and big changes, they'll say, oh, it just takes place over a long period of time. The problem is you don't see that here. You see very specific and targeted creation accounts based on the things that God created. That also goes against this theory called theistic evolution, where God creates the first organism and creates the process of evolution, but then just kind of lets it do its own thing. You don't see that. You see God being very personable and very direct in the creation account itself. So I don't see theistic evolution. I don't see macroevolution. There is something called microevolution, though. Now, I do think it's a little bit, I don't like the wording of that because a lot of people see microevolution as the foundation of macroevolution, which I do not believe macroevolution is biblical in itself. But microevolution, there is some of it that makes sense. There is things, there are areas where you'll have different species that have to adapt to their natural environment. And so, over a small amount of time, over generations, you will have changes through DNA that help those species be able to adapt to their natural environment. And so for me, I think that is definitely seen. It's definitely witnessed. And I think God knew that and he created that process, even though it's not explicitly put out here in the creation account. I do think that that is kind of shown as he sends out all the animals after the flood account to multiply and fill the earth, even though there were at that point, who knows how many different climates or natural environments at that point because of the destruction that was left to the dry land after the flood. So for me, I think microevolution, parts of it make sense. But does the idea of it being foundation for macro? I don't I don't think so at all. And specifically, the creation account does not think so. And so that's just a little bit about evolution. Don't want to get too much into it because we do want to focus on the creation account itself. And that is where we are going to keep going as we get to next week, where we will look at the creation of humanity, of humankind. So I will see you next week as we look into the creation of you and I, of humankind. And so I will see you then, but thanks for spending a little bit of time with me today. Thanks.